Welcome, everybody, to the Ford Foundation. My name is Catherine Hyde Townsend, and we are just so happy to have you here today. I am a middle-aged white woman with mid-length brown hair, and my pronouns are she and her. This side event is co-organized by the Ford Foundation, the Disability Rights Fund, and the UN Partnership on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The International Disability Alliance, the Association of Women's Rights and Development, or AWID, as well as the Center for Inclusive Policy, Women Enabled International, OHCHR, UNICEF, and the permanent missions to the UN of the UK, United States, Finland, and Mexico. Before getting started, I'd like to share a few quick housekeeping announcements. This is an accessible event with international sign language interpretation and captioning. The session is also being recorded to be posted later. A few words about this event and Ford's commitment to gender equality for women and girls with disabilities. The side event will be structured as follows, starting with a few opening remarks from the missions of the US, UK, and Finland. Then we will commence our panel moderated by Mina Mojahadi, followed by a Q&A portion moderated by myself, Catherine Hyde Townsend, and then some closing remarks by the Mission of Mexico, OHCHR, and the Secretariat of the UN Partnership on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. My colleague, Monica Aleman, I think is about to come in the room and offer us some brief remarks about Ford's commitment to gender at the nexus of disability. Welcome, Monica. No apologies needed. Also, just a quick announcement. If you need to get up and move around, please do what you need to do to be comfortable. This is part of accessibility as well. It's not just about technical accessibility, but about creating a culture where we can all be ourselves in this room and have an open dialogue. Thank you. Welcome, Monica.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in your biological time zone. I am Monica Aleman. I am the International Program Director for our gender justice work here at the Ford Foundation. I have been here at Ford for about 15 years now, and I am an indigenous Latina woman, short, wearing a white coat, and of a lighter complexion, but not white. I have been, I will say, and I said 15 years for a reason. It's because we at Ford have been on a journey in learning about what does intersectionality looks like, and what does it mean? And in the context of that journey, I think that we have grown our understanding about the particular needs of individuals with disability. I think that we are still on a journey on understanding the power and leadership of people of disability, but we have certainly learned much more about the needs and the specific orientations that we need to put in place in order to support people with disability. In terms of the intersection between gender and disability, I believe that we are still at a starting point on that. We do recognize that there is a profound intersection, and that obviously being indigenous, being a woman, being a person of color has some compounding effects in the way you experience life. But I don't think that we have yet fully understood what does it mean to bring all those identities together, and how does that then relate to your full experience in the world. I think that one of the ways that we can do that is by being in conversations with each other. And therefore, this space, this conversation, us engaging with the disability rights movement is an important first step. Of course, we are a grant-making institution, so just being in dialogue is not enough. You know, we also have to put resources behind it. And we have seen in the last 10 to 15 years a gradual increase on the amount of financial resources that the Ford Foundation has been putting on this topic. But it's still far short from what is really needed. And Catherine will be the first one to tell you, and will be the first one to tell all of us here at Ford, that we constantly fall short of the aspiration of the disability rights movement or the aspirations that we even set for our own selves. So yes, this dialogue is important, but for us, more importantly, is to continue to allocate the resources that we need to allocate for this work. So the only thing else I can say is that as someone that is directing our international gender program, we are ready to continue in this partnership, ready to continue in the partnership with Catherine, who serves as our senior advisor. And most importantly, we continuously explore partnership with organizations that are working at this intersection. So if you ever want to be in conversation with me and other members of the team about potential grants that you think will be interesting and important for us to consider, please know that you can reach out. My email is m.aleman, ALEMAN, @thefordfoundation.org. We are very interested in seeking partners, particularly those who are based outside of the United States. So if you are in Africa, if you are in Asia, or if you are in Latin America, and you have an interesting proposal for us that is bringing these two worlds together, we are interested in reading that proposal and considering that proposal. So with that, I will say thank you very much, and welcome to this discussion. I have to welcome an ambassador. I am obviously running from my house. You can see that I was dropping my son, feeding the husband, feeding myself, not eating enough, and therefore I did not have a chance to print the material. So I apologize, but this is part of life. This is what we do. We have to take care of our families, you know, as much as we are taking care of the rest of the world. And this morning, my husband wanted me to do something that was really important, and it is, we have a niece. She's turning 15 years old, and she's a great champion and organizes in her school. So he said, you cannot go to work without calling Sofia Lopez, because Sofia is why we are doing this. You know, it is about those young girls who are out there organizing that generation that is coming to us. But Ambassador Lisa, please come forward. We would like to welcome you to this conversation.
Good morning, everybody. What a real pleasure it is to be here. Let me just start off by not going to the remarks and telling Monica that I think we could all completely identify with the situation she described this morning of getting up some mornings and just being pulled in many, many different directions. So, Monica, from my point of view, no need to apologize. I have certainly been there. let me say in the very appropriate way that both you and Catherine started out. So I am on the older side of middle-aged. I am a tall Caucasian woman, but most importantly, I am really very happy and honored to be here with you all this morning. And huge thanks to Monica and Catherine for creating just such a welcoming environment and start to this conversation that certainly is something I think we can all continue to learn from. Thanks very much to our other moderators who will be here, to our co-sponsors, and most importantly, I think, to the panelists who I really look forward to hearing from today. So 1 year ago this month, we lost an iconic human rights defender and disability rights activist, Judy Heumann. Judy was an unwavering champion, both inside and outside of government, for disability rights for all persons. Her lifelong advocacy made the world more accessible and more inclusive. Today and every day, let us draw inspiration from Judy's tenacity and her important sense of urgency. This particular CSW reminds us of the multifaceted challenges women and girls are facing around the world, experienced disproportionately by those with disabilities. The facts are clear. Women and girls with disabilities are more likely to live in poverty than either men with disabilities or persons without disabilities. Women with disabilities have a poverty rate of 23%, compared with 18% for men with disabilities and 11% for women without disabilities. Women and girls with disabilities are often excluded from education and employment. Even if they are in school, they often do not have reasonable accommodations to allow for their full participation. And of deep concern, persons with disabilities experience higher rates of sexual and gender-based violence than those without disabilities. Yet we know that persons with disabilities have the same rights as all other persons, including the right to education, employment, and health, including sexual and reproductive health and reproductive rights. But they continue to face discrimination and exclusion in realizing these rights. The United States is a proud champion of the human rights of women and girls with disabilities in all of their diversity, most importantly because it's the right thing to do, but also because it's the smart thing to do. Discrimination against persons with disabilities hinders economic development, limits democracy, and erodes societies. It's why the Biden administration appointed Sarah Minkara to be the U.S. Special Advisor on International Disability Rights, a role critical to ensuring that U.S. diplomacy and foreign assistance promotes and protects the human rights of persons with disabilities. And it's why the implementation of the UN Disability Strategy is so critical. And it's why we must continue to elevate the voices you'll hear today who are using their platforms to bring about necessary, systematic change. Let me also just add a quick personal reflection. A number of years ago, I was working at our U.S. Embassy in Moscow, Russia, and one of the organizations we supported most actively was a disability rights organization called Perspectiva that was led by a very dynamic advocate, Diana Rosen. And it was quite a difficult environment in Russia, both because of the limited space for civil society, but also because people with any kind of disability or really any kind of difference were often very deeply excluded from that society. And what I observed in my work there was, yes, some of the support was about financial support to the organization, which was certainly important, but it was almost more about bringing that organization and its membership and those important voices into the policy discussion as full partners with the embassy and creating space for their role to be visible within the broader contours of Russian society. So for me, that was a very important lesson in how connecting with grassroots disability organizations is such a powerful enabler of everything we're trying to do today. And I'm sure we're going to hear more about that from the panel. Judy, in reflecting on her life, wrote, and I quote, "Change never happens at the pace we think it should. It happens over years of people joining together, strategizing, sharing, and pulling all the levers they possibly can. Over the next 2 years, we'll have several critical anniversaries, both on gender equality and on the rights of persons with disabilities. From the 5-year anniversary of UN Security Council Resolution 2475 to the COSP, from ICD plus 30 to Beijing plus 30, let us make sure we leverage all of these milestones by applying a disability-inclusive lens as we work towards the change we all value. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. And now we are going to hear a video from Alicia Hubert, the UK Special Envoy for Gender Equality, who could not join us today. She had to fly back to London over the weekend.
Hello, my name is Alicia Herbert and I'm the Director for Education, Gender and Equalities at the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. I'm sorry I can't be with you in person today. Our Disability Inclusion and Rights Strategy sets out how we will support people with disabilities to exercise their human rights, including through social protection systems. These systems are critical for protecting them from shocks and crises. This was highlighted during the pandemic, where people with disabilities experience particular socioeconomic marginalization. And only 10% of people with significant disabilities in low-income countries have access to disability-related benefits. Women and girls with disabilities are even less likely to benefit from any form of social protection. We know that inclusive care and support systems are also crucial to build and maintain functional societies. Most of this work is undertaken by women. Typically, it is unpaid, and where it is paid, it does not consider decent work standards. This is why we were pleased to partner with UNICEF to explore the question of how governments can develop care and support systems that are gender and disability inclusive. The discussions highlighted the importance of acknowledging the needs, rights, and dignity of those who require care and their carers. For many families, this may mean ensuring that a child with a disability is protected through social protection systems and can access a full range of services. It means recognizing the rights of those providing care, supporting them to enter employment again if they wish, and ensuring their own needs are met. Establishing a system that upholds the rights and dignity of all provides meaningful participation of those affected, which is why I'm pleased that you're convening this event today. I look forward to hearing more and to working with you all. Thank you.
Now I would like to invite Ambassador Lauri from the Finnish mission to the UN.
Thank you, Monica, for the warm welcome and good words. It's so nice to be here with you at the Ford Foundation. I want to also extend my highest appreciation for the work that the Ford Foundation is doing in this regard. Very impressed by the way that this event was set up to take into account the accessibility needs, and that is precisely the kind of work and the kind of standards that we want to promote also at the UN. And of course, the UN has been there along this journey with us in a most commendable way. Distinguished panelists and guests, I'm very pleased to be part of this side event and with you this morning on women with disabilities. It is important to focus on the intersection between gender and disability at the CSW, and I want to thank the organizers for having chosen this important topic. As you know, the rights of persons with disabilities is a long-standing priority for Finland and our foreign policy. And I must add, it is a key part of our development policy and cooperation in the world in a very concrete way, and also part of our humanitarian aid efforts. We have, I think, successfully managed to mainstream the rights of persons with disabilities and the efforts in our work. We advocate for the rights of persons with disabilities, especially women and girls, also as a member of the UN Human Rights Council. As you know, we are members of the Human Rights Council since 22 and until actually through this year. The starting point is that systems, structures and services must be inclusive and accessible to all persons with disabilities and at all levels. As Finland, we aim to ensure especially the participation of women with disabilities and the support of their own organizations and movements. We find it very important to advance mainstreaming of the rights of persons with disabilities broadly in the UN. This means inclusion of persons with disabilities and the implementation of the UN Disability Inclusion Strategy. Now, I think Monica was very well describing the journey that we are going through, and as you know, we Finns are very pragmatic. We like to do things very concretely and without making too much fuss about it. And I think that is a sort of next level where we need to be working on. In Finland, the disability services are planned in a way that we aim to increase the individual autonomy and independence of persons with disabilities, including the freedom to make their own choices. And I want to emphasize the role of social services in this regard. For example, in Finland, we try to focus on individual disability services such as personal assistance, mobility and transport, and coaching. Efforts have been made to arrange housing for persons with disabilities in increasingly individualized ways. We're also doing national legislative reforms to, among other aims, bring persons with intellectual disabilities to more equal standing with other persons with disabilities, and supporting also women and mothers, improving family and work-life balance. While we have taken important steps, there's still a lot to be done. I see this as a shared responsibility of us all, and I am sure that the conversations today will give us good perspectives on where to focus future action. I look forward to the discussions today, and I thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, ambassadors. Having you here is obviously very, very important, because in addition to the resources, the solidarity and the political leadership that you can lend to this effort is fundamental. But with that, I'm going to hand over to Mina, who will take us through the panel conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. My pronouns are he, she, her. I have white skin and brown and gray hair. I wear glasses and I use a wheelchair. As we've heard from our opening remarks, women with disabilities are less likely to access employment and education, and thereby more likely to experience poverty. In the context of care, some of the factors that exacerbate the risk of poverty are, firstly, that women with disabilities themselves are often providing unpaid care. And then secondly, in the absence of inclusive social protection systems, laws and services, women with disabilities will also rely on unpaid care. So without accessible and inclusive support systems and services such as personal assistance, assistive devices, inclusive social protection, inclusive SRHR services, accessible transport, women and girls with disabilities are systematically denied their rights and opportunities to be economically active. In the context of care, without inclusive and accessible and gender-responsive support, the burden of unpaid care will continue to be on women and women with disabilities. And this will continue to limit their economic empowerment and resilience. As often is the case in many other areas, also in care and support agendas, discussion is traditionally quite siloed. But there is growing momentum for this conversation across the gender and disability movements. And as we've seen in recent resolutions in the UN General Assembly and the Human Rights Council. So in this panel, we will unpack what support and access to inclusive and gender-responsive services and systems means to women and girls with disabilities, and how these contribute to enabling equal participation in society, as well as ensuring autonomy and economic equality. We'll answer questions such as what are support services that are necessary to ensure equality of women and girls with disabilities, why access to support services are critical, and what is at stake. So I'd like to welcome now the panelists. Let me just get my list. We have an impressive panel composed of 6 people here present, and then we'll have one video message. Firstly, I'd like to welcome Zainab, Ulin, and Beatrice. Or actually, I should introduce you. I don't think we've been introduced yet. No. So I'll start with Zainab, who's here on my left. Welcome Zainab Mustafa, National Women Leader from the Joint National Association of Persons with Disabilities of Nigeria. And next to her, welcome Gopal Mitra, Global Lead on Disability and Development at UNICEF. Welcome Faye Macheke, Co-Executive Director of Association for Women's Rights and Development. And next to her, welcome Beatrice Mahmoud, Acting Executive Director of Voice of Women and Children with Disabilities in Ghana. And welcome Ati Ulin, I pronounced that okay? As member of the Indonesian Mental Health Association. And on the end of the row is welcome Alberto Vasquez Encalada, co-director of the Center for Inclusive Policy. And later on, we'll see, we'll watch a video message from Muhabat Rahimova from Sharat Plus in Uzbekistan. Let's first start with short introductory questions to each of you. Firstly, Zainab, Ulin, and Beatrice. So accessing support and care is important for all of us in some parts of our lives, as is providing support and care to others. What is your experience in providing and receiving care and support, and how has it impacted equality in your context? Zainab, would you like to start?
Thank you, Mina. My experience with care and support started from an early stage in my life. After the incident that led to my disability, my mom had to drop out of school to take care of me. Things become difficult to my family and extended my elder sisters have to transfer to public schools so that my parents could afford to take care of me and give me the best medical care and education. We live in a rural community and we have to travel far for my medical and rehabilitation appointments. And there was no accessible transport. My parent and extended family pay for these costs on their own, but also paid in terms of time they spent taking care of me. Otherwise, my mother could have continued to studies and my siblings could have more opportunities too. I count myself fortunate in terms of care and support I have received thanks to my family. I went to school and I have a career. Also, I support women with disability. I mentor them and to become independent. Today I provide financial support to my family and I am the main caregiver to my children. I am the only one working as my husband is just finishing his studies and is looking for a job. I am more concerned for women with disability out there who do not have the kind of opportunity I had. Many of them have been suffering various kinds of neglect, abuse, and marginalization within their family and society. Many disabled women in my country are traumatized and vulnerable, which has rendered them destitute because they don't have opportunity to access school, gain skills, or become independent. Thank you.
Ulin, would you like to go next, please?
Okay, thank you. So my pronouns are she and her. I'm a young Indonesian woman wearing a hijab, a very cute looking one. Okay. Okay, so when I first knew I had a disability, my family situation was not ideal financially, and also due to my mental health condition. So both I and my brother dropped out of college, and my brother became the breadwinner for the family. Of course, with my bad condition, my family was very, very overwhelmed, right? And they considered putting me in an institution, actually, which ironically, it still cost a certain amount of money. But it was quote unquote better because they would spend the money anyway, in addition to also spending their time, physical and mental energy if I stayed at home. So yeah, quote unquote better. Fortunately, they were convinced to take care of me at home. Yeah, just take me at home, and lucky for me, not force me to marry someone rich, which happens to other women with disabilities I know. After that, however, my parents moved to a rural area, and my brother became my solo caregiver while also being the sole breadwinner. Of course, it affected the quality of care that I received so badly, but I couldn't protest or demand for more because I knew he was overwhelmed, and his mental health was also affected. Later, I managed to take another college degree, but my brother didn't, and it makes it more difficult for him to access higher earnings. And I was able to work again, but there were times when I overworked, got sick, stopped working, and guess what? I had to rely on my brother a lot again. And it took the tolls on both our mental and physical health, and when it happened, everything's messed up. Messy house, less earnings, and it took a long time for things to be stable or better. Because honestly, if I had a little bit of energy to do anything, I would always choose to earn money than doing housework or even taking care of personal hygiene. And in this situation, it would be very, very helpful if I didn't have to rely solely on my brother. But many think that the support that I and other person with psychosocial disabilities need are only medical or therapy related. In fact, I need support in daily basis more. Problem is, how do I tell people that I am justified to get that kind of support? Because for people with mental health condition, it is difficult because things don't run in a linear way. Everything is a roller coaster, you know. So this is what happens if care and support is still considered as the family's responsibility and not the society and the government's responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Ulin. Very powerful statement on not just the economic impacts, but also the pressure on both persons, women with disabilities and the families. Beatrice.
All right, so my pronouns is I'm a middle-aged Ghanaian woman with visual impairment. Growing up as a child with visual impairment, I was dependent on the care and support by my family and very minimal from the community, government, or other structural systems to facilitate my development. In my family, we were 10, with 5 of us being visually impairment. Due to the lack of support from the community and the government, my parents and other siblings needed to drop out of school to provide the care and support to me. For example, taking me to a far region to attend school and picking me up after every 3 months, providing mobility support to me, etc. Due to the numerous barriers I faced in accessing education and development, coupled with the scarce resources within the family, my parents offered to take care of us visual impaired siblings to the detriment of other siblings. The priority I had as a girl with disability is, however, not common in most families. From the anecdotal information gathered from my organization's work in Ghana, children with disabilities, especially girls, are overlooked. That is, we are considered invalid, and the minimal care and support is premised around the charity model, where we are not given a choice, voice, or our human rights and dignity respected. We go through series of abuses, neglect, and lack access to products and services to facilitate our participation and independence living in the society. There are limited inclusive education, inclusive employment, skills training, and the development of one's capabilities, hence rendering us among the poorest of the poor. Again, caregivers or mothers of children with disabilities sometimes abandon or quit their job to provide care and support to children with disabilities. This lessens the family income, but yet have more expenses to incur because of the disability-related cost. I must say that, indeed, there is a cost for unpaid care and support. And in my family, it affected the non-persons with disability. Let me also say that women with disabilities double as caregivers. That is, we provide care and support like any other women. In most cases, we are left in the homes to provide care and support to the younger children, for other family members to learn a trade, go to school, go to work, obtain a skill, to the detriment of our development. As any other woman, we also perform household chores. We go to market, we nurture children. But this may take a longer time and very expensive because of the inaccessible nature of the environment and some structural barriers. Thank you. Over.
Thank you, Beatrice. So from the panelists, we've heard about the costs on a household when there's lack of support systems in the community or from society. Not only in lost income, but also on additional costs for assistive devices or transportation. Beatrice, who pays for this? How can families manage these costs?
So the payment for assistive devices, that is either white cane, wheelchair, braille machines, hearing aid, then accessible transportation. Yes, so taking of taxis because most public transports are not accessible. Then accessible educational materials, Peking braillers, braille sheets. So you agree that, for example, an ordinary exercise book is less expensive as compared to a packet of braille sheets. And also provision or going through specialized training to, for example, use the computer, because after education, you would need to work in a mainstream society, and you need a technology and assistive technology. All these are bought out of one's packet. Moreover, there are limited employment opportunities for we women with disabilities who would have wished to work. For example, there are no quota system of employment to facilitate the employment of women with disabilities. Adding, social protection systems available do not consider disability-related costs. And processes of assessing this are always cumbersome and always favor the few educated elites who are able to manipulate through the layers of bureaucracies. In fact, criteria for accessing social protections exclude most women with disabilities because of our educational background, our limited access to technology, and especially the rural woman with disability who may have limited information and may have to go through offices to get information, follow through. It will interest you to know that for one to be able to access a social protection, you need to go to one's office for at least 12, 15 times, which is capital intensive because you would have to use taxis, which are more expensive, and you also use a personal aid. So you have to pay for your personal aid, who is helping you to make this follow-up, which you definitely need them. So all these are paid out of pocket. Thank you.
Thank you, Beatrice. We've heard many of the gaps and what these sort of the burden is, both financially and in terms of pressure. Ulin, you've been involved in advocating for inclusive social protection programs in Indonesia. What gaps do you see in social protection for women with disabilities?
Right, so in Indonesia, there are very strict measures by the Ministry of Social Affairs to determine if someone is considered poor. And it is such a very low threshold that many people living in poverty are still not considered poor. And also the assessment is family-based. So yeah, there is an assumption that families will take care of women with disabilities, thinking that women is just a part of a family with no individual needs or endeavors or agency. So being dependent on the family, in addition to having a family-based poverty assessment, means that social protection programs are not designed based and for our needs, and nor to promote our agency and economic independence. As a result, women with disabilities cannot access support. For example, income support when cannot work, lack of supportive policies and flexibility in the workplace, and it leads to having to give up paid employment. Even if the woman with disability can be financially independent, she will still be expected to be the one doing the domestic and care work because, again, she is a woman. And if unmarried women has to take care of the parents, she won't have access to family allowance because some jobs give family allowance only if you are married and taking care of children, not the parents. And guess what? When the parents she's been taking care of die, she gets less inheritance, again, because she is a woman. And even if she is married, in Indonesia we have a law stating that a husband can easily divorce the wife if the wife has a disability. So pretty not secure, right? So therefore, I think we need women with disabilities to be involved in policy making, so social protection system can be designed according to our needs and promotes our rights, whether we choose to work or not, marry or not marry, and take care of children or parents or anyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Ulin. We've heard from the panelists the gaps in social protection. Given UNICEF's work to advance disability inclusive social protection reforms, Gopal, can you tell us, have you seen these gaps in UNICEF's work across all regions? And can you tell us what the challenges are specifically for low-income countries?
Thank you so much, Meena. My pronouns are he and him. I am a South Asian man, salt and pepper hair. I wear dark glasses, and I identify as a person who is blind. I think the fellow panelists, so many points that that have been made resonate so much on what we see on the ground, really. Let me reflect on a few issues. You know, beyond the issue of accessibility of general programs and service delivery, one of the key challenges that we see, as I think was also touched upon, is identification of children and adults with disabilities, particularly women and girls with disabilities, for disability-related support. It is critical that social registries that are used to deliver social protection programs are inclusive. Disability certification systems if not designed with intentionality to include or to address women and girls with disabilities, will often tend to leave them out. If you see the registration of women and girls with disabilities are far less. We have seen that social behavior change component can really help as it helps address some of the stigma and prejudice that exists, that are even more for women and girls with disabilities. Secondly, social protection, cash transfer programs have to expand. Of course, there is an issue of resources, but there are other gaps too, as was pointed out by my fellow panelist. The first step that we see in the expansion is addressing through household cash transfers. And we know the gender dynamics within the household adversely impact women and girls with disabilities. So we have seen that targeted support for women and girls with disabilities evolving into individual targeted disability allowance helps. The third issue is we have to understand, again, that was pointed out, that social protection is an instrument that can help address disability-related support costs, and not only to be seen from a viewpoint of incapacity benefits. A woman with disability has extra costs related to seeking and retaining a job that needs to be covered, and we see gaps there also. Lastly, and our joint guidance that we are producing with the World Bank, with ILO, FCDO, GIZ, with support from UNPRPD, Norway, and the EU, are addressing some of the problems. Let me end with the last point. The diversity of disability-related costs, for example, related to assistive technology, personal assistance, healthcare costs, and so on, no cash transfer can cover it all. So progressively support packages, taking into consideration the diversity of needs, have to be progressively developed, and where education, health, social protection, or ministries have to come together and pull in resources. The need of a young mother, single mother with disability, who is doing a job, is much different from a young boy with disability about to enter college. So these differentiated needs have to be considered, and evolved and certification systems, assessment systems should take into consideration all these factors and eventually involve into a case management approach. At UNICEF, we are currently doing work with World Bank, with CIP, to develop disability measurement systems and a toolbox of identification and certification in low-income settings, which we feel will contribute towards these efforts. Thank you.
Thank you. So we've heard some of the issues from UNICEF's work and from the ground. So Alberto, the Center for Inclusive Policy has conducted research on inclusive community supports and services. What are the biggest challenges that countries are grappling with to transform care and support systems?
Thank you, Mina. Good morning, everyone. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a Latino man with psychosocial disabilities, with brown skin, glasses, and curly hair. Answering your question. Well, most of the research we conduct is in low and middle-income countries. And what we find as the primary challenge is the absence of state-funded support services and programs. And for example, in Latin America, based on the available data from census and surveys, the support provided by family members account for 90% of all the human assistance people with disability receives. That's very high. And as we have discussed, and everybody knows, the responsibility falls mainly on women, including mothers, grandmothers, sisters, partners, daughters. And in another line of research we conduct, which is about the additional extra cost of living with a disability, we have identified also that human support is consistently one of the highest expenses that households with disabilities face, not because they pay for personal assistance, but because the cost of providing the human support in the household through stopping working, stopping going to school. For example, in a recent study we conducted with SODIS in Peru, we found that the average cost of human support is around 43% of the total expenditure of necessary goods and services that households need to achieve the full inclusion of children with disability. And for adults was around 35%. And we got similar results in India, Georgia, and other countries. So this is a big aspect of the work that needs to be done. And just to mention another key challenges for implementing inclusive community support and services, poor legal and policy frameworks, sometimes with a very outdated medical approach, low investments, lack of data. We don't have actually much data around support needs, as Gopal was mentioning, lack of trained professionals for some specific form of support, but also low demand from civil society and organizations of persons with disabilities, because community support has been so much framed around being a family obligation that then is not often a priority in the advocacy that organizations do. And finally, as many of the panelists mentioned, I mean, the lack of accessible and inclusive service in general, not having inclusive education and having accessible transport, basically increase the support needs of persons with disabilities and make it harder to actually bridge that gap.
Thank you, Alberto. That's astounding data on the percentage of a household income that would really go to supporting within the household, supporting a family member with a disability. Coming back to Zainab, we've talked a lot about the impact on the household income, as well as accessing the barriers to accessing livelihood opportunities. How do the lack of support systems and services hinder access to livelihood and employment for women with disabilities?
Thank you, Mina. Please permit me to introduce myself again. I am Zainab. I am dark in complexion. I am a polio survivor. I'm walking my right. I have a right drop leg, and I wear a gown. I'm in love with the people with disability, and I'm proud of them. I'm so passionate about women with disability. I'm always passionate. My passion is to see that women with disability in globally have access. And my family married only my mother, because we are in Nigeria. Nigerian Muslims can marry up to 4 wives, but my father married only my mother, and she gave out to us. We are 4, and I'm the last born. We are all 4 females in our family, so I'm the last born. And I'm one of the respected person that my community used to see, because I'm always eager to learn, and anything that I have, I try to be stepping it down in my community. Even when I finished my secondary school, I started gathering some youths within my community, trying to teach them, having some lesson with them voluntarily. Thank you. Coming back to your question, Mina, there are so many things that we need to look on to give us access to employment. And if I get your question, women with disability are being marginalized. And from my community in Nigeria, women with disability, they have a little access to medical health. they have little access to toilets, more especially women with physically disability. It's a rural area. Going to toilet is something else to really consider. They have been suffering about it, fetching waters, going to school. Most of them, their family, they are very poor. They cannot afford to go to school. And for those that they can afford to go to school, most of the school, they are not accessible for them. And also, skill acquisition, most of them, they don't have skill acquisition, they lack access to, they don't have access to work. So if we look at these things, we're supposed to see how people with disability can now be aware. They should have awareness on how they can access all these things, because if women with disability, they are able to be empowered, there will be less liability to their family. The way people used to see us, we are kind of liability to them. Because I have an experience where the time that I'm getting married, there is one of my senior right from secondary school. We have been having a courtship, but later on, the parents said no. Why? Because I'm a person with disability. They don't want me to be a liability to their family. That is one of the reasons my parents make sure they make me to go to school and to be who I am today. Thank you. So if many people with disability can have this kind of access, it will reduce that gap of discrimination. Thank you.
Thank you, Zainab. So also just employment and access to employment can play a big part in just that autonomy within the society, and maybe reduce some of that support burden also from the family. Let's now hear from Muhabat Rahimova, who is the leader of Sharait Plus, a women-led organization of persons with disabilities in Uzbekistan. She'll be talking about the gaps in GBV services for women and girls with disabilities and why these services are essential for breaking the cycles of violence and ensuring equal participation in society.
The reason we are working on strengthening gender-based violence services with focus on women and girls with disabilities, because this area is crucial for ensuring the safety and well-being of women and girls with disabilities. As most women and girls with disabilities usually live in isolation and sit at home and being subjected to various forms of violence within the society and the family environment. Despite some progress in the social protection of persons with disabilities in Uzbekistan, provision of access to gender-based violence services for women and girls with disabilities is underway. Main gaps in accessing gender-based violence services include accessibility barriers such as physical infrastructure and transportation, as well as low awareness and understanding of GBV and services, inaccessible information and communication. Moreover, stigma and discrimination from service providers and family members often deter women and girls with disabilities from seeking the support they need. As a result, many of them are unable to access essential GBV services, leaving them vulnerable to further harm and perpetuating their cycle of marginalization and exclusion. Therefore, addressing these gaps is crucial to ensure that women and girls with disabilities have equal access to GBV services and receive the support they need to address and prevent violence in their lives. In the realm of employment and work, the fear of violence or the actual experience of abuse can prevent women and girls with disabilities from seeking or maintaining employment. This limits their economic independence and hampers their ability to contribute meaningfully to their communities and societies. Joint efforts with UNFPA within the UN Partnership on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities program played a crucial role in addressing the issue of provision of GBV services for women and girls with disabilities in Uzbekistan. To achieve this, the program conducted a comprehensive needs assessment to understand the specific challenges faced by women and girls with disabilities in terms of availability and accessibility of GBV services. The most effective part of this assessment was that we were able to have very open discussions with women and girls with disabilities because they trust only a person like themselves. Building on this assessment, a training module on provision of coordinated inclusive services to GBV survivors was developed for the key service providers from law enforcement, healthcare, social and psychological services. This innovative training module and training activities marked the first time such comprehensive training took place in Uzbekistan. In my view, it was crucial to engage women with disabilities directly to reach the objectives of the program. Being a woman with a disability and leading the Sharoit Plus Association of People with Disabilities, we were able to bring unique insights and perspectives to the table, ensuring that the needs and experiences of women and girls with disabilities were effectively addressed and solutions developed were truly responsive to the realities faced by women and girls with disabilities in Uzbekistan. Availability of inclusive GBV services not only provide immediate assistance to survivors who are women and girls with disabilities, but also contribute to their long-term participation and inclusion in society. When women and girls with disabilities can access the support they need to address violence, they are better positioned to pursue education, employment, and community engagement opportunities. This, in turn, contributes to their full and effective participation, overall well-being, and fosters a more equitable and inclusive society.
Mukhabat mentions also access to inclusive and accessible GBV and SRHR services are really the foundation for equality of women with disabilities. Going to Faye. Faye, you work within the gender movement. What opportunities do you see, how can a cross-movements collaboration between the women's movement and disability movement advance economic justice for women and girls with disabilities?
Thank you, Mina. My name is Faye Macheke. My pronouns are she, her. I am an African woman with blonde braids and a rather colorful dress, which is teal and orange and blue. Just think of all the beautiful colors in your imagination and you'll see me. So in terms of a cross-movement collaboration, I think this is it. This panel where we have different representation of folks who can talk about their struggles because we know they are connected. And for us, it's really about intersectionality being key. Our differences should collectively support us in holistic advocacy for change in policy, change in structural, change in a push for structural change. I remember as an example of what we are trying to achieve, how in South Africa, where I reside in 1994, everyone was going to vote, and it was a very exciting time. Everyone came out in the streets to vote, and it was women were voting, black people were voting at the same time. What I don't remember is seeing a ramp at the voting station. I do not remember anybody with sign language at the voting station. I do not remember anything that said access. And for me, that is where intersectionality plays a role, because as feminists, we believe that I am my sister's keeper, but my sister is also my keeper. So how do we collectively advocate for these changes? For me, public services are essential. As Public Services International reminds us, gender transformative public quality services are the greatest equalizer and leveler of equality in society, giving everyone equal and universal access to services across their life course from early childhood education to elder. And I often wonder, had there been ramps, had there been some access in that vote, would we be as behind as we are now in terms of access and gender justice for folks with disabilities? Would we be there now? And so what can we do as mainstream women's organizations together with disability justice organizations? And I say that we're already doing it. An example of this panel should actually be replicated at every single CSW event. We should be having panels where intersectionally there is representation on all parts of our population. The synergization of expertise, resources, and advocacy platforms supports us to arrive at where we want to be, and enhanced visibility and awareness will ensure that we have players that are able to advocate for specific economic challenges being faced by disability justice activists. We are holding a convening as AWID in December, and what has struck me is that we have a accessibility committee. We have learned so much about access that we would never have learned as a mainstream organization without the involvement of persons with disabilities. Some of these are really structural inequalities, and this forum that we're having, which is in Bangkok, I didn't even know that there were various types of wheelchairs and various types of building regulations that may or may not allow people with access to be able to adequately support themselves in terms of accommodation, in terms of even building access. So as a learning and advocacy, I believe very strongly, and we believe that persons with disabilities can and should be at the forefront of change, should be first and forefront in terms of leadership, of advocacy, and we are here to amplify and support the disability movement.
Thank you very much, Faye. So we have a lot of regular participants at CSW, so please take up this call to action. So the intersections of gender and disability always across CSW. Let's go back to Alberto next. The Center for Inclusive Policy, like you were describing earlier, has conducted research for different reports, including for the UN on this topic of care and support systems. How are countries including persons with disabilities in the care and support agenda?
Well, I think in Latin America, for example, where the care agenda, as you may know, is progressing faster, we have identified that disability is not adequately integrated into state plans and responses. No, the emphasis remains on those who provide care rather than all parties of the care relationship. And policy solutions are frequently developed with the needs of caregivers in mind, even when they may conflict with the needs of those receiving care. And so, as a result, people with disabilities remain perceived as passive recipients of care, and with laws and policies that are being adopted now, continuing to be constructed around concepts of dependency, for example, which is very prevalent in most legislation around care. There is also a limited understanding of what we have been talking about in this panel, which is this dynamic nature of care relationships, of people can provide and receive care at the same time as most women with disabilities. So I think we need to reframe a bit the conversation around care and care economy towards what the resolution of the General Assembly have done, towards care and support systems that are gender responsive and disability inclusive, and I think we should add age appropriate, because I think we cannot afford to overlook again the needs of children and older people in these discussions. I think if we, for example, were discussing more hours of school as part of this reducing the responsibilities of parents, I think we need to hear children too. And then the second part is policy imagination. No, I think that's essential, because we need to design, as what has been said, policy packages that are truly disability inclusive, that move beyond these outdated, medicalized, and segregated approaches. And for example, instead of investing in group homes, why don't we explore personal assistance schemes? If we, instead of just creating daycare for adults with disabilities, why don't we invest in independent living centers? So I think there are many ways to use that policy imagination. And for that, basically, what we need is to engage actively with people with disabilities and their organizations, particularly women with disabilities, but also it's important to have them from the local level, because we also need localization of the responses. And we know this very well, like one size does not fit all. And this is true for everything, for the disability sector and the care agenda. And so we need also to invest in responses that are tailored to the needs of the diverse contexts we want to operate now.
Thank you very much. And thank you so much to all of our panelists for this super rich discussion. A lot of dimensions. It's quite a complex area that, as Alberto said, really needs more discussion, more clarification. So I'm sure this sparked lots of questions from our audience. So we'll open the floor for Q&A. I'd like to hand over to Catherine, who will moderate the Q&A segment. So Catherine Hyde-Townsend is Ford Foundation's Disability Inclusion Senior Advisor.
Thank you so much, Mina, and our amazing panelists. I so appreciated this reflective dialogue that really built in your own personal experiences that make this topic real, this understanding that the care agenda must be considered both in terms of women with disabilities as providers of care as well as receivers of care. I'd like to open it up to the audience for some question and answers. We've got about 10 minutes. If you could kindly make your questions as direct as possible and state your name before you share your question. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lilia Österman. I'm from the Human Rights and Disability Unit at OHEHR. I would like to ask a question to our colleague from UNICEF. What risks do you see, especially from a child rights perspective, if this agenda moves ahead without taking into account the perspectives and experiences of both providers and receivers of care and support?
We're just going to take a couple of questions all at once. Is there anybody else who'd like to pose a question? Kara?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kara Yarkhan from the U.S. Department of State, and I lead within the GLAD network, the Care and Support Economy Committee. From the perspective of donors, what we often hear, and we've heard this specifically from our colleagues at USAID, is that organizations of persons with disabilities are not asking donors for guidance on how to apply for funding for support in the care economy. And I'm curious if anyone has any ideas of how can we close that gap between OPDs and donors in terms of what information is it that we as donors are not providing so that we know that you know that we are interested in providing support in this area. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll take one more question.
I'm Stephanie Greppo. I'm from Columbia University, middle-aged Caucasian woman with glasses who talks with her hands because she is from New York City. My question is to everyone here. At the beginning, we acknowledged the impact of Judy Heumann on the disability rights movement. I'd love to hear from people who has inspired you. Zainab, you mentioned that you are a leader in your community. I'd love to hear from you. Who is your inspiration? Thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you so much. Gopal, could we start with you addressing what are the risks?
Okay. And Judy was also an inspiration to so many of us. And in our local communities, when we also have leaders like who have inspired us along the way. But Judy is in her own way so remarkable. Just wanted to take the opportunity to pay gratitude. Coming back to the question, to start with, we have to acknowledge that this whole issue of unpaid care, when we're talking about dependency and burden, it stems from the fact, the shortcomings of the state, of governments, to provide the diversity of support to persons with disabilities, particularly women and girls with disabilities, across the life cycle. If we do not acknowledge this, and the issue remains the primary and the only responsibility of families, and the discourse on dependency, on burden will get further entrenched. We have to really shift from that. And at UNICEF, that's the reason strengthening care and support system is one of the cross-sectoral strategic priorities identified by a strategy last year. We are already seeing risks for children with disabilities. For example, in many low-income countries, special schools, care homes still are part of that viable policy option. Until recently, when many papers on the care economy put care homes as one of the pillars of the care system. We have seen, for example, daycare, which was one of the primary ways to prevent deinstitutionalization, or to prevent institutionalization, and promote deinstitutionalization. But we have seen that children with disabilities grow up, they get stuck in daycare centers because there are no inclusive schools and the whole support needs are not considered, the diversity of support across the life cycle. We have seen instances, for example, where there are additional support given to foster families who welcome children with disabilities, but that same support is not available for natural families. So there are a whole range of issues that we have to think about, and if we do not, there are risks. Let me end with two quick points. For example, we have to recognize that traditionally CBR and community-based inclusive development programs have not necessarily been gender responsive, both considering women with disabilities, as well as women and children and girls in general who provide that part of the care. And we do have to explore, and I end with this, the cultural aspects of care, because autonomy, the responsibility of families, role of families varies across cultures, and we have to find culturally appropriate solutions at the same time that promote gender equality and that provide support for women with disabilities, girls with disabilities, as well as women and girls in general. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gopal. I'm going to direct the next question to, oh, sorry, if you want to intervene just briefly, please. Thank you. Apologies, I cannot see you.
So I wanted to address what can partners do too. So first of all, there's the need to deepen collaboration at the national level, at the in-country level, so that organizations or right-based organizations of persons with disabilities would know your agenda and how to reach out to you. Also, there's the need to do targeted calls where the calls address specific area of needs to avoid competition among other. Yes, we appreciate inclusion, but sometimes to bridge the gap, there's the need to do targeted funding. And also, they need to be a bit flexible with eligibility. Because, for example, Voices of Women and Children with Disability started not up to 5 years, even though we are doing amazing well, making impact, but we might not have 10-year audited report or even 5 years. So in as much as, yes, like DRF, Disability Right Funded, they have series of funding you could allocate to a first-time donor. So if the eligibility criteria is is targeted at different levels, that will really help. And again, if information on grounds are made accessible and targeted among the targeted populations, it will help. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Faye. I think this issue of targeted funding for women with disabilities and their work is incredibly important. Alberto, I'm going to give you just a brief amount of time to respond, and then I'm going to hand it over to the panel to answer the question about who are your mentors and who inspires you.
Just to complement the response, I think there is another issue there, which is many organizations of persons with disabilities don't feel comfortable working directly on the area of care, because care has a very strong legacy for them of institutions, disempowerment, dependency. So I think language is important. So I think following the resolution, for example, talking about care and support is a way to open a bit more the conversation. That's one barrier for many organizations. And the second one is some donors only fund advocacy, but they don't fund, for example, mutual support. And in many communities, the state has failed. And so organizing themselves to provide care and support among the community is something that is not funded, for example. So I think opening the ways of funding is important. And then just to add something else of the structural barriers about registration, I think language is another barrier. Latin America is the region where the care agenda is moving faster. And there is a very active community of organizations of persons with disabilities working on independent living and support. And now they're realizing the need to engage in this agenda. But funders left Latin America for a long time because they felt this is a middle-income country, this is a middle-income region, when the reality is people with disabilities are still living in poverty. So they're trying to engage in the agenda, and actually tomorrow we have a conversation with many organizations just to share information and strategizing, and there is very little funding going to those organizations that want to engage in this bigger conversation.
Thank you so much, Alberto. I'd like to start with Zainab. If you could answer the question about who has inspired you, and then if we could move down the panel, that would be wonderful.
Thank you. The first person that started inspiring me is one of my uncle, who is late. He's always bringing me closer to him, and he always tell me he has a hope for me. He look at me as somebody that will become a leader, and he is always advising me. It's only education that can bridge the gap, so I should concentrate in my school. And when I was opportune to start going to school, my parents have to put me in a private school, even though my elder siblings, they transfer them to public school. So the professor, our proprietor, he is like to Professor Al-Jaburi. He always brings me closer to. And he was kind of saying the same thing with what my uncle is saying. So I'm always trying to concentrate in my school. And as the time goes, as I'm growing up, I started reading about Mother Teresa, Nelson Mandela, and other people who I'm reading their story. Those things also help me to be a better person. Thank you.
Thank you, Gopal.
When I grew up, we grew up in an extended joint family, as it was called in India. I had a younger cousin who had a physical disability. And then because of lack of support and services in a small town in India at that time, he passed away very, very young. And I really felt at the time that he needn't have passed away. And when I realized after that, everybody stopped talking about him. He was forgotten in our own family, you know. And then when I myself became blind, I thought about it and I said, look, this is what happens if we don't shout, if we don't work, if we don't come together, if we don't pull in our expertise and resources. That was, I think, one of the core kind of inspirations that I got when I came to the sector. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm so sorry, but we're going to have to move to closing remarks. I'd like to encourage everybody here to stay for a little while and talk with our panelists further about this. I think you can see from the rich answers here that inspiration comes from many different directions. After such a rich exchange, we're going to have a few short reflections and concluding remarks from Mauricio Reza of the Permanent Mission of Mexico to the UN, followed by Asako Hattori from the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, and Natalia Matali of the UN PRPD Secretariat. Mauricio.
Thank you, Catherine. Good morning, colleagues. My name is Mauricio Reza. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a light-skinned male in his 30s, wearing a blue jacket, a blue shirt, and a red tie. Colleagues, today's event holds a profound significance for our country, since it covers the intersection of two very high priority topics: gender and the rights of persons with disabilities. Within the framework of our feminist foreign policy, we stand behind the insights derived from today's conclusions, which underscore the importance of integrating a gender lens into all policies, including those aimed at care and support. As we reflect on the multifaceted challenges faced by women and girls with disabilities, it is evident that concerted collaborative action is required to address these issues comprehensively. As we navigate discussions around care and support, it is imperative that the rights, dignity, and voices of women and girls with disabilities, both caregivers and those who receive care, are at the forefront of our agenda. We also welcome the increasingly evident will of the UN membership to address disability, gender, human rights, and health in tandem. For instance, the most recent General Assembly resolution on the implementation of the CRPD, co-facilitated by Mexico and New Zealand and adopted by consensus, contains several paragraphs urging member states to address the multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination faced by women and girls with disabilities, to be gender responsive when mainstreaming disability rights, to eliminate sexual and gender-based violence in the disability realm, and to provide free or affordable healthcare services, including sexual and reproductive health services to persons with disabilities. Most importantly, the resolution paves the way for a continuation and deepening of this line of work, requesting the Secretary General to submit a report on how diverse contexts of discrimination amplify the barriers faced by persons with disability. So as you can see, this has an intersectionality component. Dear colleagues, I conclude by expressing our sincere appreciation to the organizers for inviting us here to this insightful event. Mexico will continue defending and promoting the human rights of women and girls in all their diversity, including women and girls with disabilities. And we firmly believe that collaboration with civil society organizations is essential to do it. So, thank you.
Hello, distinguished participants. I'm really honored to be able to participate in this very crucial discussion today and then hearing all the debates. Transformation of care and support systems is inevitable to ensure sustainability of our society. And it's essential to advancing gender equality and women's rights. Rights of women and girls with disabilities must be the core of this transformation and the advancement of gender equality as givers and receivers of care and support. As claimed by women and girls with disabilities, nothing about us without us. Their contribution and expertise to the gender cannot be excluded. Support is about assisting persons with disabilities, respecting their dignity, agency, and autonomy, and enabling them to live their life in communities. The concept of support and the rights of persons with disabilities, as provided by the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, must be at the center of all discussion on care and support systems, including those on care and support economy. Without responding to the rights of women and girls with disabilities, we risk reproducing care models that isolate them in institutions or in their homes, the models that deny their life in the community and then deny their choice and control. And then those models would deny their rights as caregivers. Human rights standards protect rights of caregivers and those receiving care and support. Human rights standards can guide true transformation of care and support systems that promotes equality, leaves no one behind, and is served for current and future generations. I would like to call for states and all the other stakeholders to apply a full range of human rights standards in the transformation of care and support systems, and then place rights and voices, women and girls with disability at the center. And we are, as we stand, ready to join this force with you. Thank you very much.
Good morning. My pronouns are her and she. I'm a middle-aged Caucasian woman, brown hair, and I wear a pair of black glasses. I don't want to stand between you and the breakfast. I just really want to thank you so much for this insightful discussion. Thank you very much for Ford Foundation and DRF to organize this event. I think the dialogue just started around the topic. We really need more opportunities to discuss and bring different stakeholders at the table to unpack what really means the care and support system, what is needed, why it is important, what is the impact of women and girls with disabilities not having access to care and support systems. We need more investment. We need investment that looks at the intersectionality between gender and disability, and we as a trust fund are committed to this. We are about to launch a global program on care and support systems, specifically looking on unpaid care. So we really look forward to engage with all of you in the conversation. I wish you a nice rest of the day. Thank you very much.
I just want to give a final thanks to Mina, to our speakers and panelists. Thank you so much for coming here today. I think we all have heard a clarion call that we must include women with disabilities and address not only gender norms, but disability social norms as we seek to ensure that all social protection and care approaches are inclusive of women and girls with disabilities. I also want to thank the co-organizers and co-sponsors, our captioner, Sherry, and the international sign interpreters, Fernando and Juan Carlos, and of course, Ford's amazing AV team. Thank you to everyone for making this event possible. We hope that you'll join us for some coffee and some food as we continue this conversation further. Thanks so much.